Yes, yes. Welcome, welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Doc Bookshop Live. We have a great show tonight, as each and every Thursday night, we have a great show for you. We picked some of the best books to bring forward. You'll see that we have David Wright coming up, and we just going to just enjoy the conversation. You know, it's very cold in many parts of the country, so buckle up, get you something to drink, because we're getting ready to come back. We're streaming on to all our different platforms, um, from the Doc Bookshop Facebook, Doc Bookshop YouTube. We're streaming, and we will be starting shortly. Thank you for everybody's patience out there. Hello once again. Good evening. It looks like we're on all our different platforms. This is Danya with the Doc Bookshop Live. I am your co-host for this evening. The Doc Bookshop is a family-owned and operated full-service bookstore in Dallas, Fort Worth. The mission of the Doc Bookshop is to inspire, inform, and educate customers through books and book-related events in a relaxing and spacious environment. Among books, the Doc also sells greeting cards, personal care, home care, beverages, candles, and all kind of novelties and gift items. We are just slowly opening up for in-store events, but it's going to be exciting when we do get to open up for actual in-store events. We're slowly getting there. Probably after the winter season, we'll probably do more events in our 4,000 square foot store. I see everybody coming in. Let me go check my live before I bring my guest up. We'll be bringing our guest up shortly. Just going to make sure that we're out there in the universe so everybody can enjoy this great conversation. Um, okay, looks like we're live. Um, Let me go ahead, get ready to bring our speaker up. David Wright Ballard. I got. I know he told me how to pronounce the last name. You guys, I might have messed it up, but we're gonna get it right. This has been a long month for Black History Month, but I am hanging in there. Let me bring my author to the forefront. You
Hey,
are live with us on camera, David. He is the author of three books: The Narrative History, Fire on the Beach, Recovering the Lost Story of Richard Etheridge and the Pea Island Lifesavers, and the novels Away Running, and most recently, Black Cloud Rising. The New Yorker chose Fire on the Beach as one of the notable selections, and the St. Louis Dispatch named it one of the best books in 2001. So we got an excellent writer with us today, and you guys know how much I love excellent writers. Oh, Away Away Running was named an outstanding international book by the U.S. Board on Books for the Young People, and was selected by the Junior Library Guild and the Texas Library Association for its high school reading list. Um, he is a former Fulbright Fellow to Brazil. David Wright is 2021 to 22. Mary Ellen von der Heiden. Okay, I'm not Austria and all that, so I might have massacred that. We're going to clean that one up too. Fellow of the New York Public Library's Coleman Center for Writers. His work has been recognized by the Zora Neale Hurston Richard Wright Foundation. Oh, you know how I feel about that. I am excited about that award coming up this year. I am a fan. Um, he teaches in the MFA program at the University of Illinois. Welcome to the Doc Bookshop Live, David. I am so happy to have you here today.
thank you. Thank you. It's great to be here.
So, how are you doing? How are you feeling with the pandemic? Is it over in your part of the country, or are you still having to deal with it?
I live a big chunk of the year in Austin, but I've been in New York since the fall. And New York has just been much more cautious, much more thoughtful about it, frankly. In Austin, I was in Austin a little bit in January, and it was a little bit ole ole, anything goes. So myself, I mean, I've been pretty lucky. I haven't been sick or too terribly sick, and nobody close to me. So everything's okay.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that everything's okay. Let me tell you something, David. Before we jump in our conversation, I was like, I've been reading The Black Cloud Rising and dealing with Civil War. Civil War novels are so much different than reading a regular historic
Mm,
novel. It is just so different. And, I'm looking at the news and all day today, it's been streaming Russia invades
right.
Ukraine. Oh my God. I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's just, even though these are not two different worlds that we're in today, you know, just the timing of it that I'm getting ready to go into a historical Civil War novel and the life that is around that. I don't know if you had a chance to just check out what was going on. It just happened kind of today where Russia invades Ukraine, and what I know that's going to be a financial impact on us as well as a resource impact on us. Do you have any thoughts behind that right now, or you're just
Yeah.
trying to take it all in right now?
I've been following it as best I can in the lead up to it too. But the only heartening thing that it seems to me from this point, from this vantage point, is that the United States and Europe seems to be pretty united in, including Germany, which has that sort of gas, oil, or natural gas connection with Russia. They seem to be holding firm. I think Israel also spoke out, and they were not initially. So hopefully this doesn't blow up worse than it already is. Yeah, today's a rough day in that regard.
Yeah, you guys, we're just going to have to sit back and watch because right now Russia invaded Ukraine by land, air, and sea.
Mm,
So that's kind of that's a lot at one time in one day. You talking land, air, and sea? That's some real strategy going
mm.
on right there. But I am going to leave that alone because we're just going to sit back and watch that evolve. I do want to jump into you guys. Black Cloud Rising is my new pick right now. I've
Mm.
been jumping into this book. It is amazing. It is just a
Thank you.
fun. It's some of it's difficult, some of it's rewarding. You know, it's some of it's an act of redemption. It's just so much going on with this book. I am thrilled about us. Introduce us to your latest work, Black Cloud Rising.
Well, it comes out of Fire on the Beach. I'd learned about Richard Etheridge with Fire on the Beach and wrote about his later life. But in doing research about him, and it's hard, y'all know Black history, especially in the era of slavery, there just weren't documents. You don't find the slaves by name in the census, for instance. But I could start to piece things together, and I came to find out that Richard Etheridge had served in the Civil War, and his Civil War service was active. He was in the middle of things, and this story really jumped out to me. The story of this, it's when he first joined the army, this 3 week excursion, this foray that the African Brigade, the so-called African Brigade, did, going back into the same area where they had been slaves, the plantations and farms that they'd run away from. So,
Okay, that's your background to the Black Cow Rising. It was
mhm.
the Richard Etheridge that got you looking into the Black Cow Rising, and you start off amazing. And it was almost hard because I was like, he was like 10, 12, I think 10, 11, 12. You start off with some little boys, and I'm like, oh my gosh, my heart almost sank because never have I experienced that we're starting off with young men. And they're the crux of what we use in military war. Why did you choose to start off the book the way you started off the book with young boys? Oh my gosh.
Y- yeah, pro- this is speak a little digressively sometimes, so I apologize. This might sound like I'm going off on a tangent, but I don't mean to. But as I've been, the pub date was just Tuesday, and as I've
Mhm.
been speaking, I've had the fortune of folks like y'all being interested in the book, and so I've been speaking to folks, and it is a Civil War novel, and it's initially it's almost described as a Civil War novel, but for me it's really about family, like Richard Etheridge and the way that he's troubling his his growing up, his place in. If any of y'all have ever been to the Outer Banks, it's pretty insular. And especially 150 years ago, it was super isolated and insular. So the 2,000, 2,500 people that lived on there, about a quarter of them were black, but everybody's interrelated. Slave or not, everybody's interrelated. And that part of it, Richard Etheridge trying to make some sense of that part of it, is really kind of what drove me in wanting to tell the story, much more than the actual, Civil War piece of it. The Civil War piece of it was like a great vehicle because, I mean, it's exciting and these interesting, exciting things happen. But for me, it's really about family on some level. So it seemed to make sense to, that opening scene is a flashback. Richard Etheridge we don't know that when you start reading, but Richard Etheridge is a soldier, but he's remembering those early times. He's made this
Yes.
break and he's remembering when he was a boy. And I mean, you're a slave. You're never innocent in that way, but there's a certain, despite the fact of it, he can't help feeling a certain sort of nostalgia.
Right, right, and you know what? I love that about your writing because
Well, thank you.
it was so unexpected because you got drawn into the story of these young little boys being little boys, and then you
Mm.
start getting into the relationship, and it brings in the other characters. So it was like, okay, then you all of a sudden take us into the adulthood. You take us into what is the young men coming into the African Brigade. Describe what is the African Brigade? Is it real? Is it just totally fictional?
No, the history, I was fortunate. Again, I did so much research for Fire on the Beach that I had the history sort of there. I did some extra history, but I had a real strong sense of the history and that part of it. And as I was writing this, I remember early on, because it this is 10 pages in Fire on the Beach, in part because I just couldn't find that much. But in the interim, more research had been done and I was uncovering things. And as I was plotting the novel, thinking, okay, something interesting needs to happen here, I would just sort of flip to the history and there would be an event. So that it really hews really close to the history, where I take liberties is sort of imagining the inner lives of these men. But even the only one that is not named, that is not an actual figure from history, is Revere. Revere, I made a whole cloth because I felt like that character, I needed him. The other ones are men who existed who were part of the African Brigade, from General Wild, who commands them, to Pap's Prentice, who's a 59-year-old private.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Did I lose you? It sounded like you just okay. It
Oh,
sounded
no,
like you just froze.
I just stopped
Okay,
speaking.
okay. I mean, I'm seeing you talking, but it's just like maybe it's a delay that I'm seeing a delay.
Okay, there may
But
be that. Yeah.
yes, okay. Thank you so much for just clearing that up. So what you would describe what I call realistic fiction. Realistic. There's so much reality within it, and that the only one was Revere that was not an actual character. And when you introduced me to Revere and what Revere did on the plantation, I think they were coming up on a Clapton's plantation.
Hmm.
Tell us who actually Revere is in the African Brigade, his overall role in the African Brigade.
So the African Brigade is this regiment, so about 1,000 soldiers, roughly 10 companies. Company F is Richard Etheridge's company, and he's a
Uh-huh.
sergeant in the company. There aren't a lot of officers. At this point, there are just not that many officers who are willing to command black troops. So these sergeants have a sort of greater responsibility, but also a little bit more power. Richard Etheridge is a sergeant in Company F, and so is Revere. And Revere is he's also biracial, like Richard Etheridge. But whereas Richard Etheridge is sort of looking back on his youth and trying to make sense of it, his relationship to his white family or whatever. Revere's upbringing was just different, and so he is from Richard's, I mean, and so he's
Uh-huh.
much more. Um, um, he has a notion of vengeance, whereas Richard Etheridge maybe has a notion of trying to find some sort of resolution. So
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
they're meant to
Uh-huh.
be sort of, different sides of the same coin.
Um, we're not telling a story, but I want to say I like that you mentioned vengeance, and you said vengeance in the book can be justice. Well, it can be earned. That's what you said
Mm.
in the book. I think you know what, I'm going to find that line just so I can get it right. I know that line, and it says when you talk about Revere, you said vengeance can be justice, well earned and met out fairly, and yet it be vengeance all the same. And so you're talking about, you guys. I'm not telling the book. It's a lot going on, but it's dealing with the scenario when he come across Clapson, and he was one of the plantation owners, and he was a rebellious type of owner, and we're going to read about it a little bit later. But talk to us, talk to us about the feeling that enslaved Africans got when they got a little vengeance, because there was another Mamie that came out and took some of her vengeance out too. Talk to us why you thought it was important to bring those feelings and emotions to the forefront when you're telling this Civil War story.
One of the things I wanted to be sure to try to do, like I didn't want, oftentimes for the longest time, slave characters are really like secondary in these sorts of books, and the books tend to not be, or movies or whatever, tend to not be about actually the black characters. Like to me, and this was in a way a sort of inspiration in a sort of counter sort of way uh, for writing this was the movie Glory, which is a really important movie and a good movie. And I remember when I saw it in the late '80s when it came out, I remember going to the theater and just going, wow. But I was also struck, like that movie, that's Matthew Broderick's movie, right? It's about the white colonel. It's not about
Mm-hmm.
Morgan Freeman and Denzel Washington and them. So I wanted to be able to get to tell the story, to have the black soldiers tell the story themselves. And I didn't want them to just be sort of, like noble victims or whatever. I wanted them to be complex, to you have complex feelings, sometimes to follow them, to doubt themselves. And in the instance of the Clapson scene, it's the one that, so it's a little bit of a spoiler, but it's the one that opens the book, so it's not too much of a spoiler.
But it's so
It's
much in it.
chapter one. It's yeah, with this really angry, abusive master. When they had the opportunity to sort of avenge themselves, the slaves jumped up, including, like you just mentioned, an elder woman who had, been whipped by Clapson. The thing that was interesting to me too, I mentioned a few minutes ago, how whenever I was sort of searching for, just as a writer, through searching for an incident that I needed to sort of maybe kick off the book or fill something in, I would go back to the research and I pulled that from history. Again, I'm writing it in my voice. I'm trying to make the language sing a little bit. I'm trying to heighten the drama. But that event that I described actually happened, almost exactly as I described it.
Oh my gosh, you guys, if this actually happened, this is going to send chills up your body. Get this book right here. That actually, because I read that scene,
Yeah,
and I mean it's so well written, and I'm like, oh my gosh, did it really happen, or is this some of the creativity? Because you know, in history, you never know how much information that you receive, especially with a Civil War novel. Do you have all the information? Is there well researched? And so, I mean, this scene just brought chills to my. You just gave me some chills, and
thank you.
especially when you said the cowhide sang.
Mm,
Whoa, that's wild. I, I mean, the cowhide sang. That just gave me. I don't know what it did for you writing it, but what did it do for you writing that? Just those words.
yeah, I mean, as a writer, and I've got some friends in the audience. Audrey Petty is a beautiful writer too, and we all have a different approach to writing.
Hmm.
For me, I think in life in general, I'm maybe a little bit more reserved or whatever. And still, when you're writing, you sometimes need to get these strong emotions out, to express them, to sort of evoke them in your reader. But I find that if I could find a way to say it, to understate it, that it might shout more. And
Hmm.
so I really wanted to keep it as understated as possible. And I was trying to play with that word sing, because, that cowhide, you know, whizzing through the air and striking his back, it's a song, all right, but it may not be the song everybody wants to hear. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And it resonates different, especially when you in Texas and we do cows and rodeos. We cow rodeo, so I'm like, we coming off the heel of a Bill Pick rodeo, and he talking about the cowhide saying. I was like, oh, just those words is just great. And thank you everybody for doing your thing in the chat. Thank you everybody for tuning in online. We are talking with um, David Wright, Maurice. Okay, I'm going to get it right. You know, that's my lexification. Faladé. Pronounce it. Faladé.
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 Yeah.
Maurice, so don't judge me, Maurice. Faladé. I'm gonna Faladé, Faladé, Faladé. You know, I'm not a singer either. But you guys, if you're looking, I'm looking online in the chat. You know, on our platform. I truly appreciate you, everybody, for being engaged. Everybody for pushing this book because this is a historical novel that deserves some read. I mean, we need to, you know, we do a lot of discussion on history, especially during Black History Month, and we tend to recycle the same conversation over and over again.
Hmm.
And here is David Wright Faladé, and he is bringing this book, this true story, it's a historical Civil War story to the forefront. And we have just went over the African Brigade and just the backdrop and how that was developed and the thousands and the Richard Etheridge story that is tied into the storyline is amazing. So if you want to take your book club, your reading group to a higher level, definitely try to check out this book. We're getting ready to jump into more of the conversation. I do not have a lot of spoilers. There's so much in this book and so much history that can be shared over and over. Again, you just can't get enough of it. Um, what did it mean for soldiers of the African Brigade to go from being enslaved to holding the power of life and death over white people? What did it mean to those soldiers?
I think they weren't conflicted in that they had any doubts about what they were doing. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
every one of those men in the African Brigade was a recently former slave. I mentioned Glory earlier. In Glory, one of the things that was, and again, those men were noble and fought valiantly. It was great, but that was a
Right.
regiment raised in the North. They weren't. They had some of them had been slaves before and whatnot, but they were mostly raised there in Massachusetts and surrounding areas and had understood freedom. The men of the African Brigade 2 months before, they were on a farm or plantation working, right? They
Right.
fled. They fled to join the army. So they didn't have any doubt in that way. However, um, some of the things, again, I used in the book, I'd pulled from the history. So, for instance, the unit that Richard Etheridge was in, that I describe in the book, after the episodes that make up the plot of the book, they end up being a prisoner of at not prisoners, but guards at a prisoner of war camp. So they were
Mm-hmm.
guarding Confederate soldiers in Maryland, Point Lookout,
Mm-hmm.
Maryland. And I remember there was an issue that had come up for the officers and for some of the sergeants because some of the troopers were referring to the prisoners of war as master, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because 2 months
Mm-hmm.
before, those people had been their masters. So
Right.
there are these men that are acting to assert their autonomy, their independence, their Americanness, at the same time that their entire lives had been in the context of being property. So I think
Uh-huh.
they were struggling to understand themselves in this new world, um,
Mm-hmm.
even as they were shaping that new
Mm-hmm.
world, if that makes
Mm-hmm.
sense.
Yeah, because you don't want to because you don't know when this new world has collapsed and you find
Mhm.
yourself, shadow property. You find yourself enslaved again. So it's almost a double mindedness,
Mm.
that the soldiers have got to experience. I have this level of power, but, in the mindset, I can understand, like, is it going to go away? Is it real? Is somebody going to turn on me? Because all my life I've been turned on. All my life I've been betrayed. All my life I've had family taken from me.
Hmm.
I can imagine this newfound power was dealing with this level of emotion. These things just don't go away. It's
Hmm.
just something that has to be, understood, and that
Yeah,
programming has got to be erased somehow. Um,
absolutely.
um, Describe. You mentioned in the book, runaway colony. what?
Yeah.
What exactly were you meaning behind the concept of runaway colony? What was that behind that?
So for those of y'all who haven't read the book, and again, I don't think this is a spoiler, but so the geography of where this takes place is sort of Tidewater, Virginia, which is Norfolk, Portsmouth, that area, right in coastal Virginia, and then it borders North Carolina, and then that sort of same region of North Carolina, and in that space along the border is the Great Dismal Swamp. So
Uh huh.
this swampy region can't be farmed or whatever, and because of the huge slave populations around, when slaves would run away, they would often run away into the Great Dismal Swamp. And with time, they formed in the islands, they called them maroon colonies, but they formed
Okay.
these colonies, right? And
Mhm.
as I was, again, it's from the history. I wish I had this, I was this imaginative, but as I was doing research, sort of the African Brigade marches from Virginia down into North Carolina through the Great Dismal Swamp. And as I was trying to sort of understand a little bit about the Great Dismal Swamp, I stumbled upon a book that describes a maroon colony, these maroon colonies of runaway slaves that were so deep into the swamp, they couldn't sort of be sort of caught and ferreted out. And so they sort of lived fairly autonomously within the swamp. A few of them, there was the name Goler that I used for one of these maroons was the name of an actual maroon who had been a slave and was sort of affiliated with the colony in the swamp, but also spent some time outside the swamp, kind of came and went. So it was this sort of fluid situations where I think, to a certain extent, the plantation owners know they can't go in there and get these people,
Right.
and they can be former slaves themselves can be fairly autonomous in there. So I wanted to incorporate them into the story as best I could.
This information is so amazing. You say, it's not a spoiler, but I bring it to the forefront because you describe it so eloquently, even though
Thank
it's
you.
in history. Like you
Mm,
can see, you say, "Oh, this is history. It's there." I think you kind of downplayed the research because how many people are going to find all these different nuggets that you
mm,
bring to the forefront? I mean, these are golden nuggets. Like
mm.
David, like you like, oh no, this is just history. No, no, this is like more. And maybe because I'm a history buff, you guys, my second degree is in history. So as he described it, in the swamp, this little colony of runaway slaves, and it was a maroon life, sort of thing. I mean, it just brings chills just to connect all this information. I just think it's amazing. So, I'm not going to let you continue to downplay all the amazing research that you have done. Right, right, right. Jill's laughing at me still. I don't know if she's. So yeah, and I just wanted to bring that. Okay, you got. God, did I lose you? Okay, make sure I got.
No, I'm still here.
I
Yeah.
I put my book on the keyboard because I'm getting so excited because I'm getting ready to go down another road here. I'm going to go down a whole nother road here, but in you referred to glory, right?
Yes.
You talked about glory. One thing about glory, they were giving fake ammunition, and
Mm,
I picked up on that in the book. You said, um, you talked about the ammunition, the type of ammunition that you gave. And this is not another spoiler. I just want to bring out certain components so to get you guys energized and excited about reading this book as I am. And I think these are just little nuggets that say, the ideal for me is for everybody to go back and read, get the book. You can click this green button and purchase the book right here if you haven't already purchased. Like David said, the book was just released, like February 22nd, and he is on the Doc Bookshop Live, and the book is just released. So I am just so gracious and honored to have him on this platform. He's well studied. He has a MFA, a Master in Fine Arts, and so it's just a lot of talent, a lot of well writing. So again, and then if you're on the Facebook Live, Donna has probably put a chat out there. They did put in a chat where you could click on and look at the book, buy the book, and get more information about the book. Reading groups, book club, individual books, you will not be disappointed. And if you want, let me know when you're reading this book because I would love to join your conversation because I just think it just brings chills, and I love history.
mm.
And I haven't done a lot of historical Civil War. I almost called it romance, but I think that's a little romance. We're gonna touch on it because I do a lot of, when I read historical stuff, it's historical romance. So shame on me, but so this had to. But hey, you're dealing with me anyway. So, but I'm spiraling everybody from the question I have. I do remember my question. My
Well,
question
if
was.
I could jump in real quickly though, because I wanted to say, it, again, because for me it was about family, it was about more than just these men and war. I wanted to be able to like Richard Etheridge he's his mother's son. He's in love with a slave named Fanny. He has a relationship with his, not a romantic relationship, but just sort of they grew up together. The woman who taught him to read is his sister,
Mm-hmm.
who is also his master's daughter. So his
Uh-huh.
master, and I brought those people into the book too, especially Fanny. Fanny, who is his love interest, and she's not so far away. So as they go back towards where he has grown up, he's going back towards Fanny, and they have a reunion. I wanted it to be, so it's not a romance, but there
Uh-huh.
is an
No, it's
element
not.
of yeah. I didn't want it to just be men marching and fighting each other, shooting guns at each other. So
That brings us back to my point of the guns and how important. What type of guns did they have in the African Brigade that you share in the book? And I think at one point they did have fake guns, but that's just a practice. But this
right.
whole thing that if you parallel that to Glory, it's like at one point they sent them out to fight, and it was all fake guns. So I just want to go you to dive into a little bit more about the ammunition, the type of weapons that these soldiers had in the African Brigade.
Well, that the problems that they they raise in Glory are the same problems. These
Hmm.
men they flee slavery, they join the army, but initially in the army, in the Union Army, they're being used, to dig ditches. They're being used in duty anything but fighting. And General Wild, this one-armed general who's an abolitionist and a zealot, he wants to get them in the field. So he eventually procures weapons for them, but it's not clear they're going to be able to go in the field, which is why that first chapter is there. He takes the initiative to get them in the field, and it's not just a local debate. It's not just sort of the commanding general who. It's a national debate whether or not to actually enlist blacks in the army. When they do enlist in the army, do we just use them as labor or do we let them fight? And then eventually, when they decide to let them fight, and it's always sort of spurred forward by commanders like Wild or like the Matthew Broderick character from Glory, who make sure to get their men's guns and demonstrate that these men can fight, that they will fight. Because the the question from the southern side is you just don't want to see slaves with guns. That's a slave rebellion. But from the northern side, they sort of believe the minstrel images. They think that blacks are afraid to fight, incapable of fighting, that they won't be able to be organized or something. So a commander like General Wild or Colonel Draper, who are the white commanders in my novel, actual figures, it's important for them to arm those men. So when Wild procures weapons, there were two sorts of muskets that were generally used. There were rifled muskets, so top loading. Um, you know, one was the Enfield rifled
Hmm.
musket, and the other one was the Springfield rifled musket. And I didn't know which one they had, but the
Hmm.
Springfield Armory it was in Harper's Ferry, and
Hmm.
so I could just imagine a man like Edward Wild, the commanding general, knowing they're from Harper's Ferry and remembering John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry. So I armed them with the Springfield, or sorry, with the Harper's Ferry musket.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
And so, what made you bring John Brown into your conversation? Because I can't remember. You did it early on in the book where you talked about John Brown.
Edward Wild, the general, he is a zealot in the way that John Brown was a zealot. Before he joins the army, so the general who's in command of who raises the regiment and is in command of the regiment. Before he's from Brookline, Massachusetts, from Boston. He actually in real life was one of the people in Boston that helped the Matthew Broderick character from Glory. His name is Shaw. Raise that regiment in Massachusetts. He's always been a radical abolitionist his whole life. But in the 1850s, so he's trained as a medical doctor. He's, I think medical doctor, I think, meant to save life. He goes abroad and joins the Turkish army, and he serves as a doctor in the Turkish army, but during the Crimean War, the charge of the Light Brigade War, he's a little bit, he's got this adventurous streak that's a little bit, yeah, something. I was going to say off, maybe not off, but certainly, yeah, he's got a mercenary streak.
Hmm.
When the war starts, he first is command. So he's not serving in the United States Army as a doctor. He raises a regiment in Massachusetts of white soldiers, and they go south. So he's commanding a regiment as a soldier. At the first Battle of Bull Run, he gets wounded gravely in one arm. He
Right.
recuperates, goes back to lead his company, and then a little while later at the Battle of South Mountain, he loses the other arm. So he's got one arm, and that one arm is barely, he's barely capable of using it. And it's at that point when he can no longer serve, properly in the army that he realizes the only way he can continue serving is by raising a regiment of black soldiers, because at that point they won't let him lead white soldiers. So he's a zealot. He's a John Brown. He is for abolition. He is for bringing the South to heel, and he will do whatever it takes, sort of scorched earth policy to attain that end.
Yeah, I did relate. Well, I did understand his character. That was Edward Augustus Wilde. Did I say that? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I did. And I just kept thinking like, is he genuine? What, what made him? I think you just kind of cleared that up for me about his overall character, because I was just like, this man, he's raising and he's into it. He seemed like he was empowering them, and he understood, what they went through. So I shout out to that character. I do want you. I know for time's sake, I do want you to be able to read from the book.
Sure. Yeah.
Parts of it. Thank you everybody for hanging in there. This is a awesome conversation. While he gets the book up, I want to encourage everybody to purchase the book and share the book with friends, family, book clubs, reading groups. The Black Cloud Rising is an amazing novel. It has a beautiful cover, and we are with author David Faladé with Black Cloud Rising. Are you ready?
Yeah, I am. So we were talking about the first chapter, so I'll read a little bit from the first chapter. The episode where General Wild has finally procured guns for his regiment, and he takes them into the field initially on a short foray just outside camp, where there is this where there's a plantation owner, but he's reputed to be a guerrilla commander, so they're going to arrest him. And this is from the opening chapter from the opening of the book. Oops. General Wild ordered us forward, Bacchus' squad on one flank, Revere's on the other, where the chattel houses were, and mine down the center, straight through the crackling flax. The three lines fanned a half circle around the main dwelling house. Slaves stirred. Some emerged from the barn to take a look-see, even more from the chattel houses, which weren't but shacks, with uneven joints and unglassed slits for ventilation. Then, a man with disarranged hair and considerable whiskers appeared at the door of the main house. Clapson, for sure, for he carried himself as though proprietorship was his established due. He wore breeches and a long-sleeved undershirt, nothing more, his suspenders not yet raised over his shoulders. And he stepped out onto the broad porch and stared down the general, who'd ridden to front him and not dismounted. Aught other moved. My squad being nearest, I had a box seat view when the general finally spoke. Edgar Clapson, he queried. You know damn well it is, said the other. I'm Edward Augustus Wild, Brigadier General Volunteers, commanding. He half turned in the saddle and added with a flourish, the African Brigade. We all just stood there at attention. I see your nigger pogies, said Clapson, and I do not recognize your authority. He hitched up the suspenders, an angry gesture, as though they too had vexed his peaceful waking. I command the 12th Tidewater Home Guard, the Pungo Raiders, and this here is my property. Wild signaled with a nod, and Sergeant Revere, who was nearby, flew up onto the porch in two quick strides and seized Clapson meanly by the shirt and by the nape. Unhand me, said Clapson. Two troopers joined Revere, and they forced the man down the steps and wrestled him to his knees, beneath the general's gaze. Pogies, sir? Wild said. Did you say pogies? Clapson would not respond, so General Wild continued. These men are Armageddon's agents, both Gog and Magog. Your world is no more. He turned toward us, the rest of the company. His voice boomed. Guerrillas are cowards and murderers, without honor, no better than land pirates, and their fate is either quarantine or death. This land pirate's property is hereby confiscated. Seize all men, women, and tykes. Seize the grain and any implements and tools. Fill every hogshead, fill every buckboard. It is all contraband, and it returns with us. Corporal Midget broke the men into teams, and I sent this one toward the barn and that one toward the chattel houses, where slaves were still falling out. And what had been puzzlement and gloom now turned to pure rejoicing. I could not know whether my own face showed it, but I was much overjoyed too. I was directing some men loading a handcart with farm tools when I overheard the runaway Cuffy saying to the general, "All slaves buck day slaves." His head was bowed, but his voice clear and strong. But this one in the habit of stripping him head to heels, gals as likely as men's, whatever the age and for the least offense, and he lay it on sportly. The general's expression did not change, but something was moving underneath. "I know of at least one that ain't survived it," said Cuffy. And I noted then what aforehand I had failed to see, a whipping post, well used, standing erect between the dwelling house and the barn. Or, what was more likely, my eyes had until then dodged seeing it. I had never suffered the lash, but what slave did not know it? General Wild, come abreast of Clapson, still disdainful of dismounting, leaned low from his saddle. "Even the women," said he, "even the women?" Revere yanked Clapson to his feet, unbidden by the general, but the order clear. The Secesh pulled like a colt then, no one certain what was next. Revere, with a fistful of hair and a fistful of cloth, dragged him toward that upright timber. Shackles hung from its foretop point, and while two troopers wrestled the man's lurching and writhing, Revere hitched him on by the wrists. The yard was dead still, us colored, slave as well as soldier, watching on. Mrs. Clapson's mouth lay wide open, lips a quiver, but no sound came forth. The three little boys, though, each one wailed. The general marched his mount to the barn and into it, then returned with a bullwhip over the pommel of his saddle. He rode it over to Revere. Clapson yanked at his wrist, crying to be released, all plea and no protest now. "Pongo Raiders," said the general. How quaint. I'll stop there. So.
Amazing. I love it.
Thank you.
I reread that part several times because it just gave me chills. And that's early on, so you can imagine how well written this the Black Cloud Rising is. It's just very well written and gives you chills, and I am so excited to have been able to read this work. David Wright, Faladé, you have done an amazing job, but I
Thank
cannot. Such a powerful. It was John Mark. It was a very powerful passage. Muriel, thank you very much. We were excited.
Thank you all.
Just your voice just was wonderful. But I do want to. I can't let you go without dealing with certain things, certain intersections, certain emotional intersections, like the soldiers' understanding in regard for the emancipation. I do want to discuss that because that's the basis of it. So, what did I probably should have done this before the reading because it was so beautiful. I know everybody want to probably just go lullaby or run and get the book right now. I do have some more questions that I just have
to, of course.
Bring to the forefront to make you guys even more thrilled about reading this work and how enslaved Africans were on the forefront of their freedom and their liberation. And so I do want to say, what was their understanding about emancipation, and even talk about Christmas Eve and all those other occasions that you put in there just to drive home the importance of emancipation.
The slaves, and this dates well before the Civil War, to the origins of slavery, the slaves understood so much more than what the larger society thought that they understood. And they found ways to communicate it, even putting their own lives at risk to communicate this knowledge. So in the context of Black Cloud Rising, again, every one of those men, 1,000 men in this regiment, they understand when the Union Army is nearby. They find a way to flee so they can get behind Union lines. I mentioned Richard Etheridge was from the Outer Banks. He was from Roanoke Island, and Roanoke Island is the population of Roanoke Island was about 500 people. The Outer Banks as a whole was 2,000, 2,500. On Roanoke Island, 500 people roughly, and about a quarter was slave. But as soon as the Union Army, that's one of the first places that the Union Army occupies. As soon as they do, slaves are freeing from inland. At a certain point, there are 4,000 slaves on Roanoke Island. Can you imagine? The entire population had been 500. Suddenly, there are 4,000 slaves, and that's the initiative of these slaves who they are keeping a watchful eye on what's going on. They're hearing rumors, and when there's an opportunity, they're taking their destiny, their future, their lives into their own hands. They're going to determine their own lives, and that's the character of everybody in that, of every black soldier, every black character in this book. So,
Thank you very much. And I thought that was so important to bring that to the
yeah,
forefront. In the fight for freedom and liberation is not somebody else's dream or you know ideology. It was an enslaved people vision all along. And Audrey Petty, thank you so much. She said, "Bravo, that scene was electric, and Etheridge's voice is so distinctive and immediate. How
thank
beautiful
you.
is that?" So, are some of the comments I'm reading. You guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to put it in the chat, or if you're on Facebook Live, um, please feel free to put your question in the comment. And I'm just
Yeah,
gonna say,
I'd love to field any questions.
if you're in YouTube, I'm just gonna have to fish them to him because this technology is off the chain. But I do one more. I got one more. I just have
Okay.
to bring to the forefront as a another tone within the book for me was the Black Republican, and what role did they have? What was the purpose of bringing the Black Republican into your work?
Well, understanding sort of understanding the context of the period was super important because Republicans in that context were the party of freedom, right? Lincoln
Mm-hmm.
was a Republican.
Uh
So
huh.
African Americans, blacks, during the Civil War, obviously they can't vote. But after the Civil War, blacks are Republicans basically until about, I mean, obviously, we're not a big monolithic group. There's a range of things. But black folks tended to vote Republican probably in about till 1950 or so, when the Republican
Yeah.
Party
Actually.
starts changing and becoming more like how we understand it today. Then there's this sort of, blacks start going towards the Democratic Party, and then the '60s Kennedy, and then LBJ, and suddenly the black folks tend to vote Democrat. But at that time period, yeah, Republicans were the sort of radical freedom folks.
Right. I think Jackie Robinson did expose a lot of the
Hmm.
ideology and intentions of some people within the Republican Party. So,
Yeah,
Marilyn has a question. She said, "Can you talk about the stakes of portraying the whipping of enslavers?"
yeah. That was. Thanks for the question, Miriam. That was really, again, just from a writerly place. I'm all sort of, my feeling is, a book or a story or whatever teaches a reader how to read it. You teach your reader what to look for. And so that opening scene with the boys, I wanted to introduce the family part, but I also wanted to, once we got to, the present tense, I wanted something that was immediate and that would set the tone. And
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned earlier, I stumbled on this story, and it wasn't just any random. This is just happenstance. I literally stumbled on an article. They were talking about this scene, and it also then happened to be this exact unit. So the unit that I was writing about. So that was just just good luck. But it was, again, this is a little bit of a spoiler. Um, Revere begins by doing the whipping, and that was true to the actual event. A soldier, General Wild, gave the bullhide to a sergeant, and the bullhide started whipping Clapson. And then General Wild stopped him, and he invited the women slaves to whip Clapson. And so, in real, in the history, a number of women sort of came up and were whipping this man. It was actually not Clapson. Clapson was a real gorilla, but it was another slaver. So I sort of melded two stories in that part to make it Clapson the gorilla. But what I did within the novel, and this is more to the point of answering your question, I'm sure all of y'all have read Beloved, and I love Beloved. And I just felt like Baby Suggs needed her revenge. And I remembered in Beloved, the plantation owner calls her Jenny. And so in this scene with Clapson, I have not a sort of a line of women. I have just this elderly slave woman come up and take the cowhide. And Clapson sees her. You know, she exposes her back, and Clapson sees her, and he starts pleading with her, "Oh, mercy, Jenny." And for me, I'm just like, it's Baby Suggs' revenge, you know. So I to answer your question, it was to set the tone, but it was also to sort of, yeah, to bring this sort of communal sense of vengeance, but then also questioning about vengeance, because that's the beat that the chapter ends on. As these black soldiers are watching this elderly woman whip this white man, they're at once in awe, a little bit mystified, but then they start asking themselves, what have we gotten ourselves into? What exactly were we about to be doing? So I hope that answered your question, Miriam.
That was beautiful. And Maurice, thank you for your comment, just adding to
Hmm,
how the Republican Party were recruiting a lot of blacks. So that is truly tremendous.
that
Um,
is.
so I know we got to get ready to close, and I gotta let you go. Let me make sure in the chat we don't have. Um, you guys go ahead and like it and hit your like button and everything else just for us, just so we can just be happy that you liked it, because we wanted to continue to bring these type of conversations, these unique conversations, these conversations that we're not rehashing the same type of subject line over and over, and the full telling of our history and our story. And this is a great way to do that. I know, I used to fear, war novels. I did, because not because I didn't like them, but I felt that I would not understand the complexities when you start talking about infantrymen and brigades
Mhm.
and battalions and this infantry and that infantry. I felt that I might not have been able to keep up, but it's so well written that you can really keep up. If you have those fears, and everybody don't have those fears, but that's why I really jumped after this book when I seen it. Because let me tell you guys, 750 million books produced, like, okay, I had to really sit down and focus and curate. And this is one of those things I said I'm gonna, I'm gonna step out, and especially on the other side, it's a lot of white Civil War novels. Oh, they're all over the place.
Yeah,
Um,
it's an industry.
Yes, especially in Texas. Oh my God, just so I don't want to let you go, because when I say Texas, because you talk about Texas within your book,
Mm,
and you talk about the Comanche within your book.
mm.
So you got. I'm not gonna do spoilers, but you talk about it, you guys. Invite me to your reading group if you're doing that. I don't know if David's coming out, but you drop us a line or anything. But I would
Reach
love to be a
out,
part.
reach out through my website. If I can join in through Zoom or something, I'd welcome doing that. It'd be really fun. So
Okay, she said, okay, man, I gotta read all these comments because I love comments. She is about a spirit of self-love. We can understand why she might want revenge, but also know the limits of it as a philosophy. So yeah, she's going
mhm.
back. Yeah, and that's what we talked
Yeah,
about early on, Miriam, vengeance. So I won't. Audrey, okay, I'm trying to let go. I'm just trying to,
no, it's
give
fine.
something to our customers. Thank you so much about the launch of the book at this very moment where the teaching of the history in this country is at risk and under fire. Thank
Hmm.
you for bringing that to the
Yeah,
forefront.
thank
The
you.
This amazing novel is overdue and so on time. Exactly. I've already did something on critical race theory. I'm not going to go
Hmm.
down that road because we will spiral away from this amazing story. So, guys, get the bud. You can purchase it here. Click the link, and we do have a discounted. We have I want to say, let me just check and see. Oh, it is discounted for 15% off, you guys. So we try to compete the best way we can. But yeah, tell a friend, share the information. This is an amazing book. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. It's not a hard read. If you have problems reading words, it's just amazing. It's just a great book, you guys. Thank you so much. Where can people reach you if they wanted to reach you?
Go to my website, David Wright Books. Oh wait, Yeah, I think it's David Wright books. I'll type it in the chat.
Is it going to be made into an HBO series?
I would love it. Are you going to
Oh,
produce it? I would love it.
Maurice, we gotta push that. We gotta
Yeah.
get that out there because there's not enough of these types of stories told. I think the
uh,
last one was probably Glory, and
yeah.
I'm still remembering that one tear he did. I think that gave him an Oscar. That one tear from
Yeah.
Glory.
Yeah.
So, and the Soldier Story, that's another one.
Hmm.
But it's not that many films, and we are overdue. I think Miriam said it before. It's just well overdue. And so, I'm gonna get off my soapbox. Thank you guys for understanding my voice. It is
Thank
Black History Month, and I speak a lot. I do so many different platforms. So thank you so much. Get the book, share the book,
thank
and
you
just
all.
share the love. I appreciate everybody. Give us a like out there. You have a nice evening, and thank you for coming on the Doc Bookshop Live this evening.
Thank you all.